Hello, and this is our first introduction video to our new plugin called Xparticles, which is a new particle system for Cinema 4D. It is a object-based particle system, so there's no Espresso, and it's an event-based system, so it's pretty much in between from the standard particles and thinking particles, but with a lot more power than the standard particles. So first thing we're going to do is have a look at the emitter. So if I could click on the emitter and start to push play so we can see some particles, and as you can see the default particles are quite small, so what we'll do is we'll go to the particles tab, and here we have particle display options. We can have text, squares or spheres. I like to use squares, and I'm just going to make them yellow so that they're easier to see. Okay, so go back to the object tab. We have the emitter shape, which at the moment is rectangle. We can have circle, sphere or object, and we have the handles, so we can control the size, we can control the angle of the emission, so you can split them out. I'm just going to make a few more, make them a bit faster. Okay, so that's what those two do, and that's again the same for circle. So that's 0, and a sphere will give you a spherical object, and they're just going to emit out from the origin. Okay, so the next thing we have is object, and we can use anything from splines to polygons. So if you're going to use a spline, you have to set the emit from to points, and then you're going to get it to emit from the points of the spline. You can change the axis, so you can see there you go, emitting from this spline object, and obviously if we rotate it, animate it, they're going to follow around. And we can also do polygons, so that, emitter, drop the object in there, again they're going to come flying out, so let's just change that to low speed. Okay, so that's emitting directly from the sphere. What we can also do is use selection sets and vertex maps. So let's just stop this for now. Create a selection set, and I'll also make a vertex. Okay, so in the emitter we have a selection, so we can drop in our set selection, and now they'll emit only from there, or again we can use our vertex map. Now with the vertex map you have to use points, you can't use polygon center, it will only work from the points of that vertex map. Okay, so that's quite handy, you can do a lot of stuff with that, animated vertex maps, etc. Let's just delete that and put this back to rectangle. Okay, I'm just going to speed it up a bit. And just drop this back down to 100. Right, what else can we do? Well, we can offset these, and again if you emit from an object you can offset their origin from the surface, and that's handy for things like when you use a trail object or something like that, so you want it to come from within an object and not from the surface. We have the standard things, birth rate, lifespan, speed, variations for all those, and in here we have our display options, particle groups, then we have questions and modifiers. Modifiers are like your standard particle modifiers. They will also work with our system. So if we drop in turbulence, you can see it's going to use Cinema 4D's turbulence, and again that works with all of the options we have here, and also with MoGraph effectors. We can delete that, and that's what we have there. And questions is what we're going to look at when we want to build an actual particle system. So let's just delete this. Next thing we have is a thing called system, and the system is basically a null object, but it will have an entire system within it, and you can create all these options directly from this system. So by default it's select that and add a complete setup, and if we look at our complete setup, we have an emitter, a question, a controller, and inside the controller is an action. Now what that means is with our emitter we're emitting particles, and let's just get a bit more time. Timeline, and change our display. So we're emitting these particles. Next thing we want to do is add an event. And an event is based on a question and an action. So the question is saying parameter to test particle age, and we have a lot of options in here: speed, frame, count, index, distance. So let's stick with age. And question mode, it is greater than or equals or is less than 90 frames. Range is, if we add a range, it's going to be either side of the 90 frames. So if I say 10, it's going to be 10 frames before or after the 90, so it adds a bit of randomness to the effect. Then we have to pass this to a controller, which is this controller, which then passes it to the action, and the action is going to drive any of our modifiers. So let's say we want to change to the direction, so we'll add a direction modifier. We'll put that into the modifiers link, and we'll change this to action controlled. What we're going to do is have it go absolutely 90 degrees in the heading, and we will have that happen at 40 frames, or 40 frames of age from once it's born. So let's drop that in here. Now we need to tell our action that it's going to control this direction. So control direction modifier. Then we drop this into here. Modifier will affect particles. Okay, and when that happens, I want the particles to change their display so that we know an event has occurred. So if we push play, now that they get to 40 frames of age, they are changing direction, and they're also changing their display. So we know that exactly here at 40 frames an event is happening. So we can do more and more. I can add another one, so system, add a question, make sure the question goes into the emitters link, and what we need to do is add a bit more age. So we just life to 500, so they're going to keep going for a bit longer. And then we need a controller, so add a controller. With our controller we need to add an action, and let's say at frame, we'll stick to 90. At frame 90 we are going to, what shall we do? We will add some turbulence. Okay, so let's get that, and again it has to go into the modifiers list. So if our emitter has the two questions and the two modifiers, And this question is going to control this controller, and this controller is going to change the turbulence modifier. Turbulence modifier needs to go from independent to action controlled, and the action again will change the display. Let's go to red. Okay, so this is where this event's happening, and let's crank up the action of the turbulence. So they get to here and then they go a bit too crazy. They start getting turbulence, they also start stopping for some reason. But as you can see, what we're doing is layering up events and controllers and actions. So that's how the system works. Okay, so that's, you can also use these independently. So let's start again, delete that, and get an emitter. Change that. And let's get 150 of them. Okay. So all of these things can be controlled on their own as a modifier, and what we can do is use a fall off. So let's get a box, and as you can see, they're going into there and they're being forced to go that way, and you can layer these up. Let's go for add a gravity, modifiers list, gravity, but I don't want it to happen until it hits the fall off. So let's go for a sphere, and put the sphere over here. So you can do all sorts of stuff with these modifiers, and we have quite a few. Turbulence, target, let's just have a look at target quickly. And target, oops, target modifier, and get ourselves a target object. Target, oops, object to target, emitter, modifiers, target. Okay, so now they're cruising on and they're just going to chase this target, and you can do quite a lot. You can switch targets, so you can have more than one. You can repel, so they're going to fly away from that target, and again you can control this via an action, so they don't target until you want them to. Okay, so we also have gravity, particle life, particle scale, spawning. We have a lot of options here for what we can do. The next one I want to look at is flocking. So let's close that. Particles, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to emit from 0 to 20 frames, let's say 30 particles. Okay, so it's just a little block of particles, and I want them to be a flocking set. So let's get our flock, put in the modifiers, and now they're going to cruise around and do a few things. And it's actually easier if I use trails, so what I'll do is show you the trail object. Trail object is like MoGraph Tracer. It's going to trace a spline trail behind the particles. So let's just drop the emitter in here and keep everything else at default. You can see you get a nice little trail. So this is a good way to see what the flock is doing, and it just cruises around. Let's just make this a colour so it's easier to see. Object. What we have is separation distance, is how far away from each other they're going to be. Cohesion, that's how cohesive the flock is going to be together. So let's just bring them back a bit. Let's say 65. Turn acuteness and forward motion weighting. They're just all options to how you can control your flock. And they'll just basically cruise around for the duration of your time, but you can make those happen again as an action or when they hit the fall off. So let's go turn this into a sphere and see, they won't flock until they hit the sphere, or they won't flock until you drive it with a controller in an action. Okay, so that's flocking and your trails. What we also have, oops, deleted the wrong thing, is a generator and sprites. So the generator is how we generate objects. So let's just drop this cube in here, drop the cube in the generator. In the generator, what emitter, and generate geometry. As you can see, it spits out our geometry. You can layer this up. Let's block a sphere in there as well, and set it to sequentially or randomly. Let's go for random. So it's a random emission of whatever objects you have in here, and each object is an index. So if we want our particles to change from one set of geometry to another set, we'd use this geometry modifier. And how it works is you drop this in here, and then the list goes index 1, index 2, so down the hierarchy is what index number you got, and so you can change it from that index to the next index over time. That's how you can change your particle. We have a freeze modifier, and that's just going to freeze these particles at a specified time or within a fall off, and again you drive that with your questions. All of these can be driven via time via the question and controller. Another one we have is cover fill. So say I want my particles to cover the surface of this, and again let's turn this back on and make this polygon, and then we're going to use the cover fill and object to cover fill sphere, and you can use all polygons visible, so visible to the direction of your particles, using rays or normals. You can use the vertices, which if you have an animated object or deforming object you want to use that, or fill object, which will fill the volume of the object. Let's just stick with this one, and our particles, which I haven't put the modifier in the list so they don't know what they're doing, should cover now our sphere, and you can do quite a lot with that. It's a handy little modifier. So we have quite a few. We can spawn particles, we can change their life, speed, spin, targets, turbulence. So that's a quick rundown of the system. There's a lot to it, and there's quite a lot of learning involved. I hope you like it, and I will send up some more tutorials soon.